Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
Just making a cup of...
I just want you to know that I am recording you, so I have to tell you that.
Okay, you have told me that, and I accept the fact that you are recording me.
Good. I want you to know that this is a very family-oriented recording, and I don't want any of your filthy language.
I will not be. I'll try. I'll try to behave myself.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed you didn't jump on that the moment I said it.
Well, I'm trying hard. I just bit my tongue. So what can I say? I'm just finishing making a cup of coffee. I'm just making a cup of coffee, and I'm just going into my desk with the phone, and I can sit and we can do this.
Okay. So let me start out properly by saying that this is April 8th, 2018, and this is Stephen Palmer in New York, interviewing Pete Cullinane, that's Cullinane, or as I call him, Cullinsane, who is
you're doing it.
Who is in Sequim, Washington right now, Sequim, Sequim. And it's 1:30 there and 4:30 here. So, Pete, I'm just going to ask you some rapid-fire questions to start it out, just to get a sense of your background before we get up to the late 60s in the village and all of that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you could just tell me a bit about your childhood, when you were born, where, some family members, and yeah.
I was born in a town just outside of Boston called Arlington, Mass, and went to high school there and graduated from high school there and went on to higher education. And let's see, do you need that background? I was at Boston University for a while, then down to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and my main background was mechanical drawing and doing mechanical type of works. And then it was time for me to get a job, and I was offered a job at the Met as a draftsman. That's how I started working at the Met. And I was with the Met for many years and worked my way up to be a scenic artist. And what else would you like to know? Set painter. I was born in 1941. I am now 76 years old.
Good Lord.
That's what I say.
1941. What were your
Correct.
parents' names?
My dad's name was Al, and my mother's name was Dorothy, known as Dot. And we had a typical middle-class upbringing. I had one brother, Paul, and my brother passed away 5, 6, 7, God, let me think now, 9 years ago now, actually. And he died of a heart attack, unfortunately. Very tense person. We were two totally different people. Anyhow, my upbringing was middle class, upper middle class, I guess you'd say. We had a cottage up in Maine, a small, humble cottage. This was not an estate or anything. It was just a small salt box right on the beach. Now, of course, it's now I've been there since and visited, and now it's a huge house, and people live in these places year-round. Back then, we just were there for the summers, and that's great memory, child memory, because we always spent our time on the beach and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was just over the New Hampshire border. It wasn't way up the coast of Maine, but it was a nice little area. It was actually I'm trying to think of the name of the town, Kennebunkport, in that area.
Oh, Kennebunkport, where the Bush family has its summer place,
yes.
Right?
They do, but we're not of that nature. Our place is a humble little cottage, but they were, mixed with some big ones, too, in the area.
Mm. And any religious background?
I was raised Catholic. Did practice it for a while, and now the Pope and I don't get along, so I fired the Pope. So that's where I stand. I fired the Pope a long time ago.
And your relationship with your family members?
I had good relations. Oh, I have tons of cousins who I was very close to. A lot of them have passed on, and I still have a very close one of my cousins her name is Masha. Her and her husband were very close friends. They come out to visit quite often, and I visit them. They're in Lexington, Mass, which again is outside of Boston. And I had a great childhood. Tons of cousins around, tons of aunts and uncles, and we grew up together, and we knew each other, and we've known each other all through our adult life, pretty much. A lot of them, unfortunately, have gone. I'm actually one of the few left with my cousin Masha. And I have another cousin, Elaine, a wonderful woman. Her and her husband were very close, and they live up in Maine. And I still see and speak with them quite often. So I still have a nice relationship with them.
When you were a youngster, did you have any sense of being attracted to men?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Do you remember the first time you realized that, or your first experiences? And
oh God, I think ever since I was, I'd say maybe 12, 13 years old, more in that area. But I did fight it. I was very popular in school and very popular in high school. I dated. I went out with girls. I got a girl pregnant. I managed to do that. And much of my folks' dismay. And nice Catholic girl, and I was a nice Catholic boy, of course. And my folks ended up paying for the abortion. And then a very sad thing happened. The woman who I did manage to get pregnant, her name was Gail Welsh, from the Welsh grapefruit family. And as it turns out, it's an interesting side story, her father was abusive to her. And now there was a question that came up before my mother and father died. We talked about it. Did I get her pregnant, or did her father get her pregnant? There was a little question there. But, of course, it's too late to do any DNA crap and anything on that anyhow, so it doesn't really matter. But it's just a little gray zone there. But that's, it's sort of a funny little side story. She's passed on since.
How old were you when you got her pregnant?
Let's see, I was in high school. I was in my third year of high school. So let me think. I was, 18, 16. Yeah, so I think I was 16.
In the late 50s.
Yeah,
yeah.
Would have been the late 50s, yeah, that's right. 57, 58, 58, maybe 58, I think rings a bell. 58, 57,
Getting
58.
An abortion at that time was not easy, right? How
it was a big deal, yeah, but the family had money and they knew doctors and whatever, it was a big deal, yeah. Trust me, it was. No. I was going to go straight to hell. Well, I didn't, so here I am. Any other personal things you would like to know?
And when did you have your first sexual experience with a guy?
Let me think. Well, I used to hang out with the boys, and we would do little jerk circles, and it wasn't a gay thing necessarily. It was hard to explain. What was it? I guess it would have been. It was erotic, and we would have a little contest who would come first.
How old were you when that was going on?
I was probably then, let me think, 14, 15.
Where would this take place?
Oh, we'd go down to under the railroad bridge tracks downtown. There was a place where the old railroad used to run at one time, and we'd go underneath the tracks, and the highway was above, and the tracks went down below. and we would fuck around there. We never fucked each other. It was just more like jerking off separate. We never touched each other necessarily.
It's interesting because I was never part of one of these things, and for years I've heard about boys, primarily straight or presumably straight, having circle jerks.
Yes, and it did happen, yeah. And we would watch who could come the first. It was like a contest. You know, it was very innocent, and I guess I got off on it. I don't have memories exactly about it necessarily, but I know I enjoyed watching the other guys jerk off. That turned me on. I don't know what turned them on, but you know, I knew what turned. You know, they didn't know that, but I'm sure it did.
Do you remember in high school? Did you have any sexual relations with other boys or anybody?
Oh yeah. Some of the football teams. Oh yeah, sucking them off. Yes. And it seemed just to be a natural thing to do, and they thought it was too. They weren't uptight about it. A few of the boys in the football team. Yeah, I remember that.
Did they know you were gay?
Not really. No, none of that was mentioned. It didn't exist. Yeah, because that word didn't exist back then. You were either queer or that was about it. But no, I was never called queer. I was never called anything, really. I was quite popular in school. And
that was not looked down upon by the members of the football team?
Well, I don't know how many people knew, you know. Because remember what they could tell me, what they could say about me, I could say about them. You see, it was like, you know what I mean? so what could they say?
Good point.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
1960.
1960. Okay. June of 1960.
Right.
And then after that, did you go straight to college?
Yes. BU for 2 years, and then went from there to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. And I was very involved with that. I enjoyed, those are great times. I enjoyed that time. And I came out a little bit more at that point, and let me think, what was this that happened to me? I guess I was visiting my folks in Boston, and I looked up something about a gay bar. Never been in one in my life, so I went to this gay bar in Boston. Unfortunately, the gay bar was called the Punch Bowl, and it was a drag bar, and that scared the shit out of me. And that's not what I thought. I didn't think about myself as a gay man in that situation. And that was the last time I was in a gay bar for a long time.
Did you feel like, were you thinking to yourself, well, if that's what gay is, then maybe I'm not gay?
That was exactly it. Yeah, this is not what I got. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I thought of. Yeah, exactly. As being a gay man. It's actually scared the shit out of me.
How come?
I was just scared me. I didn't, this is not what I wanted. And I thought, was this, are all the bars like, is this what it's like? Not being very naive at that time. Naive as I could be in the gay world, a part of it. Not naive about of sexuality, but just so I closed myself off totally from any gay activity or anything. And I went actually for a long time being sort of asexual.
So this is in Boston now in the early 60s.
Yes.
So let me get a sense of the environment at that time also. Boston in the early 60s, I'm thinking Cambridge and Joan Baez at Club 47. Were you interested in any of that, the folk music scene?
I used to hang out at a club in Harvard Square called La Paloma, and It was like folk music. It was the beatnikish era time, crossing over, in before the hippies. And we used to go to this big place to hang out with some friends of mine. Was at this coffee house, La Paloma. I remember so well, and that we thought that was really, we were really in with the in group, and there'd be folk singing and poetry and that kind of stuff was going on back then. And it was a nice atmosphere because you had the college universities all around there. You had BU, you had Harvard, you had MIT people, and it was a nice group of people. And at that time, I was very involved with music, and I thought I would like to do that as a career, but that never happened. But so I had some very interesting friends. And they were all straight, as far as I know. I didn't have to talk about my sexuality with anybody. I did date, and very, very active musically, very active in shows and theater. It just, it was fun. It was a fun time, a very interesting time.
I think the word you used earlier. Go ahead.
No, go. I'm sorry. Go.
The word you used earlier was beatnikish, like beatnik period.
It was the beatnik period. Yeah. It would have been that period. Yeah. You had like bohemians, and I think you had the beatniks. So it was like that area, and it was very innocent. Maybe not as innocent as I thought it was, these clubs. There was no drugs that I knew of. None of us did drugs. We would just drink coffee and listen to folk singing and poetry and, thought we were supposed to like it. Not all, some of it was pretty boring, I'm sure. But it is what was going on. There were that was very popular at that time, especially around the college campuses were these clubs, and they weren't beer drinking clubs. They were coffee houses, and they were very popular. There were quite a few of them. What
was happening politically? What was your political consciousness at the time?
Politically, that's a hard one to remember. I'm trying to think, because I had gone through the Eisenhower era, and was aware of what was going on. And then when did I become more politically aware? I'd say I became more politically aware with Nixon. More than that's where my political activism sort of came into being. Was
Nixon versus Kennedy, or when Nixon became president?
I liked Kennedy when Nixon became president. Yeah,
I see. You liked Kennedy?
Yeah, I was a Kennedy fan. Yes, yes, definitely was. And still am.
Was it? What was that? What was that like to be young and into Kennedy at that point? What was the sentiment of America?
I'm trying to think. It was generally a peaceful time. One thing I do remember most definitely, of course, is that whole Bay of Pigs thing that took place in Cuba. That was a very tense time, and I remember that was a lot of political talk about that amongst ourselves, what we thought would happen, could happen. And being drafted and going into the service, we still had draft at that time. And we wondered what was going to happen to us, as a group. And we were vocal, but there was nothing to demonstrate necessarily at that time. There was no great demonstration, but there was a lot of talk amongst ourselves. And I hung around with basically a group of liberals. Most of them were liberal.
Was there was there any sense of any gay consciousness in the early 60s that you can remember?
Oh, God. Trying to think. Not really, because when I can't say, not really.
Okay.
It was, I'd have to really think hard about it, and it was never a big deal. I didn't freak because I thought I was gay, or I knew I had gay tendencies. But I also thought a lot of other people had that. And see, some of the gay relationships I had were with straight men that were maybe bisexual. And maybe I thought I was more bisexual. How I justified it, I have no idea, but I did. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And were you still seeing women in the early 60s?
Let me think. Oh yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
I had some friends from high school that we stayed in touch because they went to school in the area. We stayed in touch. A handful of us did stay in touch, and we would see each other quite often. Then finally, I think along the way, I did begin to meet men who had lovers and partners, and then I was beginning to understand a little bit more of it, of the gay world, so to speak. We would entertain. They would entertain in each other's homes. You know,
mm-hmm.
Not sex orgies, but just entertaining. Cocktail parties or whatever the hell. Social things like that. And then I remember during the summertime we'd go to a gay beach, and that was a new one to me. Where these beaches were, I never knew there were such things as the Rambles and all that stuff. That was all new to me, and that's when I became to come out a little bit more.
Are you still at this point in Boston, or you mentioned the Rambles, so I'm thinking we're moving into New York.
I'm thinking it's Boston, and I knew because I was between Boston and down in Rhode Island. The Rhode Island people would know about the beaches out there, in New York. That was very common out in Long Island and so on. So I knew about it, and I was invited out there once or twice early on when I went, and then I never spent a lot of time in any of those beaches really, but I was in a handful of times only, really, to be quite frank with you. I was just busy doing other things.
Do you mean Fire Island or Reese Beach or Jones Beach?
Fire Island, yeah, Fire Island. And Jones Beach was real popular. That's a beautiful beach, still is to this day. I think it's one of the nicest beaches in the world, actually. And I remember the Jones Beach having a big bathhouse, and I always like to hang out and just look. I remember that, watching these dudes coming in and out. Very innocent.
Which parking lot in Jones Beach was this?
Oh God, it was right out by the beach house. Where you change before you go in the beach.
Mm-hmm.
There was an arcade building there, if I remember quite correctly. I'm trying to picture it. I'm sure it's very different than it is now. But we would go there quite often. I always enjoyed Jones Beach. I actually went there more than I went to Fire Island. Fire Island only a handful of times. I never cared that much for Fire Island. It was too intense. I like a mixture of people. See, I always like mixture of people. I never I like the company of women. I still do to this day. I enjoy women. Always, I never excluded my homosexual life exclusively to men. And when I say exclusively to men or exclusively to women, I mean as friends, at least. I still have I have more female friends, actually, than I have male friends right now, strangely enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What year did you come to New York?
Okay, let me think. 1960, then 62, 65. Let me see, 65.
1965. And where did you live first?
When I moved to New York,
Yep.
I lived on Jane Street, West Jane, and it was West Jane in what's the main street that goes down to the village, down the Greenwich, yeah, Greenwich, not too far from the meat rack.
And what was Greenwich Village like in 1965? What are your memories of the place? Sights, sounds, smells.
Oh, let me think. It was well, it had lots of gay bars. They were all over the place. I was really busy, really working at the Met that time, so my work took a lot of my time. And the group of people I would hang out with were people I worked with at the Opera House. And our big deal was we'd go up to Harlem is where we hung out because of the jazz clubs up there were much more fun than the clubs down in the village, to be honest with you. I remember a lot of fun things about the village. The Met sometimes would do little side things, for the youth opera, and one of the things we did, there was a theater down in the village called the Theater de Lys, and I've forgotten what street it was on. It was right off of Sheridan Square. Everything was off Sheridan Square, to be honest with you, the way I thought of it. And I remember, seeing a lot of off-Broadway shows were going crazy at that time. I'm trying to think. Lebanon Man used to be two big producers, and I can't think of the theater they had there down in the Greenwich Village, but it was a big deal. And I'm trying to think what else. And then I got involved with friends from NYU, and we became friends because there was a side program at the Met to training, looking for new talent and new scenic artists and new designers and, young designers, young this and so on. There's all kinds of little programs, and a lot of them was connected with NYU. So I was a little bit involved with the NYU people, which I found interesting. So I was really busy in the business and enjoyed it. So, and I enjoyed living in the village because it was enjoyable. I had a great place. I'm trying to think. The village.
Did you live with anybody?
It was colorful. Pardon?
Were you living? Your apartment, was it your own, or did you share it?
No, this is my own. Yeah, it was my own.
Okay.
Yeah, it was my own. I was very fortunate to be able to do that, and I enjoyed living in the village. It was relaxing. It was laid back. It was very acceptable. It was a lot of gay stuff happening, but there was a lot of other stuff happening also. I remember working with, this one girl, dress designer. We became close friends. We were just friends. We'd hang out together. And she was doing a lot of work with, I know, Theater in the Square. That was Lebanon Man. Does that sound familiar to you? Theater in the Square? It was a big,
I've heard of
big
Theater
deal.
in the Square, but I don't know where it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was down there, right down there in the village. It was Theater in the Square. And it was Lebanon Man. They were the two producers, directors of that group. That was it. And I got to know one of the gals who was a dress designer. And we became close friends. And I remembered I worked on, and then I did a little side work sometimes on things, and I was asked to work with the designer. They were doing Iphigenia, and it was with Lebanon Man at the Circle in the Square, as a matter of fact. And she was doing the costumes, and I worked on the sets on that. And the Circle in the Square was an open square theater. It was in the round, so it was not like it wasn't a proscenium theater. And it was interesting. So I did some fun things in the village. I remember just fun places, hanging out. I think I mentioned this to you. I used to run up to a place called the Potbelly and get coffee, and they had breakfast there. And I remember, some fun little places, and tried to find them again, but they're all gone. They don't exist any longer.
What's your memory of the Stonewall?
I'm sorry. Repeat.
Go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
I lost track. I lost track of what I was going to say. You were mentioning something. No, that's
it's always the problem with telephone interviews, because you can't see what the other person is doing, whether they're about to say something else.
You anticipate what you're thinking about too. It's in your head, and you're trying to, think about, what you're thinking about. That's part of it also. But I remember the Village Vanguard. I remember all those places. I don't even, do they exist today? I have no idea. I really don't. I used to walk by the Village Voice all the time. I remember that, and picking up, that was one of my favorite papers, and so on. Now, you mentioned...
what is your memory of Stonewall?
Okay, now Stonewall, it's interesting because I never was in that bar in my entire life. Went by it many times. I knew it was there. I used to go up there. What is it? If you walked up by the Stonewall, kept on walking, you get up to 7th Avenue, is it you would get to?
Yes.
Avenues of the Americas, right? Wasn't it?
No, 7th Avenue.
It was 7th. I'm trying to look. It's sort of like a triangle there. Yeah, I'm trying to think the streets, because everything's at an angle. It's different in the village when you get down so far. Yeah, I walked up there, walked by it all the time, up to 7th Avenue, and there was outside a little coffee place. We'd get coffee and have breakfast. I wish I could think of the name of it. It was very popular. And during the summertime, it had an outside cafe. And wasn't there a prison across the street from it? Was there a prison there?
Well, not far away was that women's prison.
The women's prison was just up this. Yeah. So I am right. It is still on there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting. I just read somebody else's account of the Stonewall, and they worked up very close nearby and used to go across the street and get pastries. I'm wondering if that's the same place that.
That's a good possibility. It would be. Now, that's interesting. Yes, that sounds right. Isn't that interesting? Yes. And a very interesting thing, just up the street, I think there's a big apartment building there now before you get to 7th Avenue. You walk by the Stonewall, keep on walking. Fernando, he was a leather maker, and he's made my first pair of leather pants. I remember. That's so funny. I can remember that. But I've been by the Stonewall many, many times, and just never. It was just a bar I wouldn't go into. Not that I didn't have anything against it. It was just a bar. Like there were a lot of bars in that area I walked by, I never went into. And the gay bars I would go to would be down on the waterfront. The Eagle, I think was called the Eagle then. I'm not sure what it was, and there were others down there. The Triangle was a very famous bar for a while down there, and that's right in that area called the Meat Rack. And that's all different now. Yeah.
The Triangle.
And that would have been at the end of Jane Street. If you keep on walking down Jane Street, you could go into Hudson. And the West Side Highway was there at that time. The 2-decker was still there and still operating. So I go back to those days. The Triangle was a very popular bar.
Where was the Triangle?
Oh, God, it was at the Triangle, and I'd have to look on the map of... I'd have to look on a map. Greenwich Street, go down. See, I'd have to see a map of New York to really find it, if I could find it, which I think I could. And it was at an area down not too far from the waterfront where it came out to a triangle, and the building took that little triangle took the whole thing. That's why it was called the Triangle. And it was a bar downstairs, and upstairs was an elevator. You go upstairs to an after-hours place upstairs.
Oh, that almost sounds like that one that was at 14th and 9th.
possible it. I wonder if that's it. What was it called? The thing changed name.
I forget, but it was shaped like a triangle. Let me just say I'm reading.
That's it. I bet you that's it.
Richard Goldstein's book. He said that on nights when we put the paper to bed, the office was full of writers, and the gay bar below it was a lively place called the Stonewall Inn. Every now and then I would hop across the street for a pastry at an all-night grocery called Smiler's.
Smiler's, of course. Oh, God, Christ. I remember Smiler's. Great. Oh, yeah, they used to have the best day creams back then. Yeah, Smiler's was there, of course.
Okay.
I remember that definitely, yeah.
So what do you remember about the Stonewall riots? Where were you? How did you find out?
Now, what day did that happen? It was a Saturday?
It was, you know, I constantly mess this up. It was the June 28th.
Okay. Was it a Saturday night or a Sunday morning? I'm just trying to think. The reason why I remember it being...
Go ahead. Keep saying. I'll look very quickly.
See, my memory is I had been working at the Met, and we had to do, let's see, it was a Saturday. Yeah, we did. I had to be, my job, I had to be on stage during the performance, and they did the Met matinee on a Saturday, and there's also the Met evening, and I had to be there for both performances. So I was at the Met all day and pretty much all night until the curtain came down, because I was what they call Dutchman. You have to, when you have scenery being moved and replaced with new scenery, you have to sometimes fake paint scenes and so on, and stairs maybe, and blend in color quickly before the curtain goes up. And so I was there all day, and I really have, when I did the matinee on Saturday, I really never had time to come back down to home, down to my place on West James. So I would stay up there uptown at the Met, and I was there all day and pretty much until the curtain came down that night. So I'd get out of there probably around 11. Back then I did have a sports car, and I also had my Harley, so I would go. I had, back then also the building I lived in had parking, believe it or not, and it was free. It was part of the rent. And a studio apartment on the brick. It's a brick building. It's right on the corner of Greenwich and Jane. I think it's still there. I lived on the 5th floor, facing the river. Studio apartment. I paid $190 a month for, included parking for a sports car and my Harley. Hey, pretty good, huh?
Amazing.
Isn't that something? Yeah, now I'm sure it's all condoed out, by all means. Anyhow, I came back from the Met. I think I left the Met around 11, zoomed home, and I got home, and I said, oh, God, I probably stopped at Smiler's for something. I usually did. It was common. Walk up there, and then you park the bike or the car or whatever, my truck or whatever. I mean, the sports car I had at the time. And sometimes I'd take the subway, too, based on the weather. And most of the time I would drive. Because the Met also had parking at that time for their people. So, it was very easy for me to get around and park, because that's always a problem in New York. Anyhow, so now I'm back home, and then I decided, I remember, my routine would go home, maybe just put the TV on, just have a drink or whatever. And then I said, do I want to go down to a bar, have a beer? Do I feel nervous? I'm tired. I don't feel like doing anything. So, and I'm looking at the clock. That's why I think it was Saturday, because my recollection is going to Sheraton Square at that time. In the middle of Sheraton Square was a newsstand. It's all different now. And it's a big newsstand, and I wanted to pick up the Sunday Times. But I know I wanted to pick up the Times, whatever, for something or other. So I went over to the newsstand, and I noticed at that time, and it was late. It was late in the evening, and I can't remember the exact time, but maybe 11-ish, 12-ish maybe, and before midnight. I noticed a lot of police activity all around the square, all around that area, and a lot of horseback police were there with their animals. And I said, "What's going on?" And I asked one of the cops, "What's happening?" And all the cop told me, he said, "Get out of here if you live here." He asked me, "Do I live here in the village?" I said, "Yeah, I just live down on West Jane Street." He said, "You may want to get home. I think there's going to be trouble here." That's all I knew. So I go home, and then I sort of spaced out on it and forgot about it. I assumed I picked up my newspaper, and I went home, and I did not know what had happened until the next morning. That's when I knew what happened. I didn't hear any of it. I was a little further away also, and knew nothing about it. It wasn't until after the fact. And it was in the newspapers. It was a big deal, obviously.
When you got up the next morning? The next morning is so June 28th was the Saturday. June 29th, Sunday. You.
It would. So
am
I right on the date?
Yeah, June
Sunday
28th
is when I knew about it.
Yep, June 28th was a Saturday.
It was a Saturday, so I am right. I was picking up the Sunday Times. Yes, so I that is correct. I didn't know about it until Sunday late morning. I was supposed to meet some friends. I'm trying to think. La Paloma, I believe, was a restaurant we were going to go to. It was a well-known restaurant. No, not La Paloma. That's about, what's the name of it? Fernando's restaurant, Spanish restaurant in the village to have a brunch. And that was the big conversation of what was going on. And I remember Sheraton Square. Fernando's was not too far from Sheraton Square. And you could see there's a lot of damage to things, and the street was a mess. I do remember that. And, of course, the big talk was what had happened that evening at the Stonewall and how they fought back. It was a big deal.
What was your take on it? What was your sentiment or feelings about it when you heard about it?
Well, I thought it was, when it really affected me is what happened that Sunday later that day. One of the boys they were grabbing everybody, they were throwing everybody in paddy wagons. From what I understand, they were throwing them to all the jails. Now, just up the street, not too far from the Stonewall, is a police. I think it's on Greenwich precinct, and it's a small two-story building, stone building that has iron fences all around it. And a boy, one of the boys, just freaked out and jumped out the window and impaled himself on one of the. He died. He was killed instantly on the iron fence. And I thought that was really, really sad.
Were you ever arrested at a bar, a gay bar? Did that ever happen to
you? Never, actually never. I'm trying to think, has it ever happened or known about it? No, actually not. For some reason, the cops never bothered the leather bars down by the waterfront. They just, they were a place called Colors was one of the name of one of the bars. Does that ring a bell at all? It's an old gay bar that's been there for years. It's right down on the waterfront.
Did you say Colors, like Collors?
No, Kellers, 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 I believe. It was known. If you go down, I'm trying to think, is it Christopher Street? Yeah, go to the end of Christopher Street. Yeah, all the way down to the water and take a right. The bar would have been right there on the waterfront, and it was called Colors. I'm pretty sure, my recollection. And just around again, as you go down the end of Christopher Street, to the right was an apartment building, and next to it was a place where my motorcycle was being fixed if I needed fixed or work done on it. It was called Ideas and Design. I can remember the name of it. And that was there. That was a business. So I knew that area a little bit. I'm trying to think.
after Stonewall, what were the kind of discussions that were going on? Did it affect the way you felt about being gay or your rights? Or
Oh yeah, well there was. I mean, it really changed everything. I mean, this is something. It was a big deal, bigger than I realized until after. It's more after the fact, to be honest with you. And I mean, it was really a big deal, and became more aware of other gay men and other gay situations, and I would hear stories about having rage like this that was real common. And the gays were just so little scary, they would just, they never rebelled. They just wouldn't think of doing that. And this is the first time it happened. And it was a big deal. It changed a lot. And I was sort of unaware that the gays were treated that way. And it was more of the feminine gays, the gays that were obviously, were gay. And they had a hard time of it, and that really changed. And it was a good change, as it turned out. Because I did have gay friends who worked at the Met, and I mean, it was the buzz. I mean, that was the talk. That was it. And I do remember one thing. We did do something. There was a demonstration a week or so later, and I think it was in Churton Square. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't know that, but I can,
I remember something that, and I was I did go to it. I was part of it. I was one of the people in the crowd. I wasn't a speaker or anything, but I remember there was something. Because right across from from that bar was a little park, a little triangle park.
Well, for the next couple of nights, there were demonstrations. It wasn't, not riots anymore, but
I
the
think
first
that
night was the riot.
That's what it was. Then it was a couple of nights later. It seems like a Tuesday night for some reason. I don't know why. So that would be right then. I did go to something down there at that little park, Triangle Park, that little park. That's across.
Were there a lot
across
of people
the
there?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Definitely. Yes. And there was a police presence, but they weren't stopping anything. They realized they made a big mistake. Remember, this was in the paper for a good 2 weeks. What had happened there? As time went on, the news got less and less front page, but it did make New York Times and the Post and whatever other papers, the Village Voice, of course. They were right there.
What went into your decision to go to the demonstration?
Friends from the Met that I knew, gay friends at the Met, and other people that weren't gay, they were very pro-gay. That was sort of nice, is I did have a lot of friends who were straight, but they were very pro-gay. And I didn't have to tell them I was gay. I didn't have to tell anybody about my sexuality. I felt very comfortable with them. And a group of us from the Met went down. I think they came to my place, and we hung out for a little bit and maybe had drinks at my place and then walked up to Sherman Square. And it had to be like a Monday or a Tuesday night. I think it was probably a Monday night because that's a black day at the Met. A black day meaning it's a dark day. No performances on Mondays. So it could have been a Monday. It would make sense.
Do you remember anything about the demonstration?
I was just one of many people there, and there were speakers, and I remember the mayor was really upset about it, and I think the mayor sent a representative down there, I believe, at that time, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to think about that. But I did go to that. I was at that for a while. I didn't stay the whole, for the whole length of it, but I was physically there. And it was a very mixed crowd. It was not all gay by all means. There were women there with their husbands and their kids, and there were gay people there, and it was a very mixed crowd, and not a happy crowd. They were upset about what had happened.
Following when you moved to San Francisco, right?
Yes.
In 69?
I was in 69, yeah. I was, the Met used to share productions with other big opera companies, and I was sent to San Francisco to work on a production that was shared with the Met that had a fit on the San Francisco Opera stage. And when you go from different opera companies, opera stages to another company, you have to make adapt for the size of the proscenium. And so I was sent out just to work with one production. And that would have been, let me think, I was sent out twice. So I was sent out in 69, 68, and I was sent out in 69. But what would happen with that, when that happened, I would end up staying because they needed scenic artists. They needed people to work on productions. They had a lot of new productions. And a lot of the designers who worked at the Met also happened to be doing a lot of productions at the San Francisco Opera. And the designers knew me and Holly Hass. That was another woman who was a very, very well-known scenic artist who worked with me. We were the ones that did the stuff at the San Francisco Opera, and they would keep us all summer. We were there until the season opened in September. We'd end up in San Francisco in May, and we were there supposed to do one production. We'd be there May, June, July, August, or sometimes right until opening season at the Met at the San Francisco Opera in September. We'd be there all summer. So I spent 2 full summers in San Francisco before I moved there. I moved there in 69. I was 69 or 70 when I actually lived there. But I was there. I know I was there in 68, and I know I was there in 69. Still had my place. Meantime, I had left the village and I moved to Brooklyn Heights. And I remember I had to sublet my place in Brooklyn Heights because I was away 3 months, 4 months out of the year. Because the Met would send Holly and I to San Francisco to work on productions there, and we would end up staying there all summer. So I made friends in San Francisco. I'm an outgoing person, made friends, and one thing about another, and ended up moving there full time.
Later in the summer of 69, you ended up going to Woodstock. Were any of the guys you went up to Woodstock with gay?
No. No. I'm trying to think. I was there with Mike. I know. Mike's girlfriend. There were 3 of us. Yeah, there were 3 of us, yeah. And again, remember that whole Woodstock thing, no one knew that it was going to be as large as it was, as you well know. We just thought it was just going to be, a very simple little, hoo-ha with some good talent, the Grateful Dead were there, and so-and-so was there, and Joan Baez was supposed to be there, we heard, let's take a ride up to Woodstock, what the hell. Not looking at the weather forecast that great. So we did. And then it turned into, what it turned into, a big, big deal. No, they were all straight, no.
You guys didn't stay at Woodstock long, right?
No, we did not. No. We wanted to get out of there. It was a mud pile. We were not bikes. It was a pig pen. Yeah, God, no. I did hear a couple of I'm trying to think who I heard. I'm trying to think who it was. Who was it? What band was playing? I can't even think. I'd have to think. Look it up more carefully. But no, we didn't stay. No, the weather was terrible, and you're on a bike outside rain. It's a pain in the ass. So we didn't stay.
Yeah,
we did not stay at all. No, we didn't. No, and you can understand that. But you weren't there. You were too young. Yeah. But you know what it was about.
Oh, I've been in crowds where I've just wanted to get out.
Yeah, it was that kind of thing. Yeah, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad vibes. It wasn't on that level. It was more weather related, to be honest with you, than anything else. And remember, it was a big farmer's field, as you well know, and it was a mud pile. It was all mud everywhere. Yeah. And as you know, it didn't rain constantly, but it doesn't take much, you know.
The year before,
and there were a lot. Mm-hmm.
There were a lot. Go ahead.
No, the year before.
The year before, I think you helped do set design or set up lighting or something at the opening of the Fillmore East with Janis Joplin, right?
I just happened to be working on that. That came out of the blue, and a friend was working on the crew, and they needed some people, and I just happened to be around to do that. And I did the opening, worked on the opening show of Fillmore East down there on 2nd Avenue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Janis with
that
Big
was
Brother, Tim Buckley, and Albert King.
Big Brother, Big Brother and Hilton Company. They were the biggies. Oh yeah, she was something. Yeah, that was quite a show.
You saw the show?
Yeah. I was on stage. I was right there off stage. No, off. I was off stage, but I was there. Yes. Uh huh.
Did you meet her?
I rubbed shoulders with her. Yes. Mhm. Oh yeah.
Amazing. I'll rub your shoulder the next time so I can say I touched the shoulder that touched Janis's shoulder.
Well, she was quite an energy. I mean, her energy was just phenomenal. But of course, she was whacked out of her mind, you know, with her Jack Daniels and her lines of coke. I mean, everyone was whacked out of their mind, you know, not just them, the audience as well as the performers. I assure you, that was a big deal. That was a big deal.
Opening night. When you were just, because I just wanted to bring in the counterculture into this a little bit. You're in Greenwich Village. Mm-hmm. What was your sense of the interaction of gays and hippies, or gay hippies, or some people are like, oh no, the hippie thing, that was straight, and other people, self-identify as having been very much hippie and gay also. I'm wondering what your sense of all of that was.
No, I can see that a lot of hippies were gay, definitely, yes. Oh, I saw that. I actually saw that more in San Francisco than I did in the Village, but it was definitely in the Village, definitely. No question about that. No, a lot of the hippies were gay.
By the time you moved to San Francisco, I guess the hate was not at its peak.
It was winding down. Yeah, it was winding down. It wasn't like it wasn't the 60s. It was beginning to wind down quite a bit. It was still very much there, but it was not as much. Let's put it that way.
Are you, given what your sense of Stonewall was at that time, were you surprised by its long-term effect, its sort of iconic moment for gay history?
Well, it changed my attitude a lot towards other gay cultures. Because within the gay world, there's many levels of culture and many levels. And I was more into the leather motorcycle group down at the leather bars. Or I used to like bisexual bars. I used to enjoy those places. So I wasn't too much into what I'd call a Twinkie bar, and I sort of didn't have anything against those bars or those people necessarily. They were there, but I'd never thought about it. But then my sympathy changed after this. It definitely did. I became more aware of other culture, gay culture. And more tolerant.
So, and more tolerant of diversity in the gay community?
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. Definitely, yes. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So did you feel that change came early on, or in retrospect when you thought about it?
In retrospect, I'd say, as I thought about it, yeah. And I think too, what happens as you get older, you become more tolerant. You know, and as you travel, and I've been very fortunate because I have traveled a little bit in the world. I have family in Italy, and I spend time there, and it's a whole different world there. It's just a different way of life and pace of life, and their thinking, and seeing other. I was very fortunate to see other cultures. I have good friends in Stockholm. I spend time there, and just learning and seeing different cultures have sort of opened my mind a lot too. I have very little patience for narrow-minded people, and more so when you get older. You become more tolerant also. You know, let it go, Christ. You know, a lot of people carry too much baggage. Yeah, just let it go.
It becomes difficult to hold on to so many opinions toward everybody.
Yeah, it's like baggage. There's a lot of bad baggage. Yeah. And I know people that take that to the grave, and I think, what a stupid asses. You know, they're not really enjoying life. We're here for such a short time. So I don't know. Of course, also what's happening today in the political world. I just don't want. That's a whole other world.
Crazy.
Crazy. That's not what we're here to talk about. But
let me just ask you: Did you start going to the? Did San Francisco have? New York had its first sort of Gay Liberation Day or Pride March.
Marched in the. Oh yeah. I used to go to the gay parade in San Francisco all the time. No, early on. Yeah, I marched in it. I've had my Harley in it. Yeah, I did. I was very involved with that. But I go back early when it first started. Then it got bigger and bigger, and then you do these things after a while, and you're part of it, and then you say, okay, enough. And then I got a little too much crowd, But I did. I was very involved with that stuff, definitely. Mm-hmm. I'd go to City Hall, and there'd be speeches by the mayor, by this, by that, and so on. Remember, I was working at the Opera House when Mastoni was shot, and I went through all that.
Were you happy about Harvey Milk being district supervisor?
Yes. Of course, yes. Mm-hmm, definitely. I would see him down in the Castro. I used to have my film career developed at his place there on Castro Street. I lived up on 18th, just up the hill a little bit. 18th and Ord Street.
You lived at 18th and what?
Ord, O-R-D, Ord Street. 18th and Ord.
Do you remember next door to Harvey Milk's place a beauty salon called Maurice's House of Beauty?
Vaguely, yeah. Mm-hmm. And right next to that was a shoe repair store. Was next door to that. Yes, I remember it. Yeah. See, I remember where Harvey's bar is. That used to be a Rexall drugstore. The Midnight Sun was very popular. It was just up the street, across the street, almost from Harvey's camera shop. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know where this is. Remember, I first visited San Francisco just for a few days in '79, and then moved there in June of '80. I lived at 18th and Sanchez, so I lived in the Castro.
At Sanchez, right? Yeah. I remember that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just. So this is enough for now. It's an hour. I appreciate this.
Okay.
So let me tell you what will happen next is I'm going to send you a form for legal release, and the form is it doesn't mean that this is now something you can't edit out. There's going to be, at a certain point in the next number of months, transcriptions. These will be transcribed, and you'll get a copy of the transcription, and you get to look at it, and if there's something in there you think, oh, I shouldn't have mentioned somebody's name or something, or there's something that you don't want in there, you get to edit it out, all right? And then you sign off on that one. And then when I get to read it and we look at it again, I know there's going to be questions that come up. I'll think to myself, oh, for heaven's sakes, this was so obvious. Why didn't I jump on that question? So there'll be a follow-up, okay?
You'll be editing it, so to speak. Yeah, and yeah.
Well, we'll just get a look at it, and it'll make their, other questions will come up, so we can have a follow-up in a few months.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
All right.
I understand.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
And you're going to try and get in touch with your friend Leo.
Now, I dig it. Are you still recording this?
I am. Do you need me to stop?
Well, I did speak to Leo. As it turns out, it's not what happened. What happened with Liberace happened at Palm Beach Playhouse in Palm Beach when they were working there. It wasn't. I got the story confused. No, it had nothing to do with Stonewall.
Okay. All right.
Unfortunately, because that would have been colorful. Yeah.
Right. Liberace going out Stonewall's window.
Yeah. But it wasn't. That's not what happened.
Yeah. But that is not what happened to transcriber.
No.
Transcriber can have stopped.
Right. That did not happen.
Let's stop here, and and I'm going to need to get your address, and let me just get a pen real quick, and I will send you the legal release with a self-addressed stamped envelope, so you don't have to do anything. And what's your address?
2092 South 7th Avenue, Sequim, Washington, SEQUIM, 98382.
98382. Okay. I'll get that in the mail, and I'm gonna stop this now so it doesn't record anymore because it's recording out in the ether. And
I understand.
And I'll be in touch with you too. Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
Thanks a million.
Okay, so are you off the recorder now?
No, I can't be because the recording is. I don't have it's in the ether.
It's in the ether. I understand. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I won't shoot you hang up. I understand. Okay, well, you guys take it easy. I hope I gave you some information.
Yes, of course.
Remembrance of things, that I remember. Sometimes getting exact days and dates are right, but I was right about it being a Saturday night. I do remember that. That I do remember in Sharon Square when that took place. So I was right. That's rather interesting. So I wasn't sure whether it was or not, and it was a Saturday night. Interesting.
And
so I do have.
It may have been a Monday night that you were at the demo. So
I think it might have been. It very well might have been, because everyone was off at that day. It's a dark day, and that would make sense. So I think it probably would have been a Monday night. Yeah.
All right.
Well, okay. Well,
right.
Wonderful. Okay, then I'll be hearing from you later on. Then I trust. Okay, my pleasure.
You will. Thanks, Pete.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
you take it easy. My pleasure.